you, number one, for coming. I really appreciate this. This is simply an opportunity to kind of show you where we are right now, what has been going on, and what's the process. So, if this looks a little familiar, any of you that were around when we did the bond presentations, you're going to see we have things we're trying to remind you. We did do a process, and we're going to kind of keep in line with what that was done, or what we were doing at that time. So we're planning for the next generation of learners. If you notice, we quit calling those 21st century learners. Since we're approaching the third decade, we need to be talking about the next generation. And all of you, I hope, are aware that statistically, 50% of our kids will be in jobs that we don't even know right now do not exist. So that's the preparation that we need to be thinking about as we build this building. We're not building it for where we were, we're trying to build it for where we need to be. And that's a little bit spooky because we don't know what some of those jobs and opportunities will be. So here's where we've been, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Started back in the fall of 2014, the board asked to do a facility study. We brought together a group of people from the community. We did invitations and then also said anybody that wanted to come and get involved with that. Help us go through what do we think our needs are as a school district for the next 50 years. That group worked from March of 2015 until they came to the board about 11 months ago with the recommendation that we think you should do this. And this, the board accepted, and this was the bond referendum, and that we took to the community and then did in May of 2016. So all of that was a lot of conversation. You saw a lot of things. And then after the bond election on May 24th, you haven't heard a whole lot. And that's why we're here tonight, is to explain what we've been doing, where we are, and get some of your thoughts on that. So I know there's a couple of you that were in those community planning meetings, and we went over this vision a number of times. But for those of you that weren't, take a minute to read it. It really tries to concisely say what we believe is the vision of this district when it comes to what our facility needs are. I have a great deal of faith in all of your ability to read, so I didn't want to read it to you. But if you look at particularly that we want to make sure all of these things integrate well into our technology, they foster that creativity, the state-of-the-art venues for academics, athletics, and the arts, and we want to inspire our staff to learn, our students to learn in as many diverse ways as possible. So it's a really big challenge in terms of what that group laid out for us. How are you going to now do that? So we've taken that vision and we're trying to go through the following steps. So we had the bond referendum, and if you remember within that, the things we sold were we need more space, we need safety and security for our kids. They're our most important things. And one of the things we really came out of that group, since we can't predict what jobs are going to be out there, we need to create this building in a way that it's flexible, that it doesn't lock us into one way of doing things. And that was really very clearly told to us by the community planning group as the board as we moved ahead on these projects. So here's what we've been doing. I'm going to talk tonight about programming versus remodeling. There are going to be two projects tonight that we're just talking about remodeling, and those have to do with safety, and they're really not talking about how we teach or anything else about what we teach. It's just simply get the building safer for our kids as they come into it and make sure we're able to lock the doors and keep those that we don't need in the buildings out. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. But probably the bigger thing, and what we're spending the greatest amount of time on, is talking about that programming question. Today I was at a Partners for Student Success, which is a partnership of area schools, St. Cloud, Sauk Rapids, Rice, and ourselves, and a bunch of private entities trying to say, what can we do to improve the outcomes for our kids? One of the things we know, there's a lot of different ways. We all worry about our own children, but yet as a society or as a community, we need to make sure all our kids get an education because we want our standard of living to go up and we all want to have high quality lives. So what is it we need to do? So in that conversation today, they gave a little snippet of information about our community and talked about kids' attitudes in 8th grade, which I think start to talk a lot about programming. So it was 8th graders in the St. Cloud area schools, Sauk Rapids Rice, and Sartell-St. Stephen. And they brought out 2 questions. Number 1, they asked 8th graders, is what you're learning meaningful to you? In other words, is it relevant? And what would you consider our 8th graders' answer to that be? It actually was pretty good. 75% of them saw a relevancy to it. But if you take the flip of that, that also meant 25% of them did not feel that relevancy to what they were doing. The second question was, how do you like to learn? Would you like to learn with your hands, or would you like to learn by sitting and getting? And it wasn't quite put in that terminology. I'm doing a little bit of editorializing there. But what was the difference? How many kids would like to learn with their hands and do what's called active learning? What would be your prediction? More than 50%, less than 50%? More. It was 97% of kids would like to do that. So that tells us a couple of things. Number 1, whether it be here, whether it be our neighbors, actually those numbers are pretty consistent across the state, we need to find ways that our building can offer education in a little different fashion. It needs that, remember what we talked about right off the bat? We need that flexibility. It needs to be able to do things a little bit different. We still need content knowledge, never going to deny that. Euclid was alive and well 2,500 years ago. We still need Euclidean geometry. I'm not saying we're ever going to get rid of that, but we might teach it in some aspects of it a little different to prepare our kids for the world that they're getting ready to go into. So that's what programming is, and we spent a lot of time with our staff, with architects, with other educators, with our own administrative team, and talking about how can we put all of this together. So we had teacher planning sessions, and you kind of seen what's going on with that, and now we're to the point where we want to talk to you about what's next. We also had some outside experts come in, and one of the things we want to do, we're going to build a building that's slightly larger than this building, but we also don't want to be eaten alive by how much it's going to cost to run that additional space. So how can we, in terms of that sustainability conversation, how can we make this building out of sustainable resources and also keep it efficient in terms of what we're doing? We've had a lot of conversations about that. We had a technology workshop. Anybody want to predict what technology is going to look like 5 years from now, let alone 10 years? Yeah, that's the big guess. We don't know where that's going to be. It's been interesting when we did some tours of other buildings. One of the buildings that's a lot of you may have been to is Alexandria. It's a newer high school. And one of the things, even though it's only 3 years old, some of our staff went there, and we have the big one-to-one, and we've used technology pretty well. They actually thought that building was kind of behind when it came to technology. And that's just how things are rapidly changing in that particular area. So we try to get a good idea of where we're going to go on each one of those. And then we also had an expert come out of the cities. She actually works for the Target Corporation, or did work for the Target Corporation, talking about what's the best way to have our kids be safe. Because one of the conversations, and you're going to see that here, is this building's pretty open. And a lot of people right off the bat, when we start talking about safety, think we need to put a brick wall around every place so that we don't have the dreadful things that we've been seeing in the press, also pretty close to us. We want the building to be safe. Their biggest mantra to us about safety is about visibility. You want to see who's around you. This building is kind of an interesting one. It's a beautiful building. It's absolutely phenomenal from the trees around and everything else. But there is some concerns if you were to walk out the backside of this building over to 5th. There's a nice trail. It's got a light down it. I don't know how comfortable I think I'm very comfortable in Sartell. But I think there are some worrisome things about that. So we're talking about, as we build this new building, how do we make sure that we put put safety out there in the forefront. And one of the places we've looked at a lot is, it's probably the worst nightmare of any of us, Sandy Hook, New Jersey. What did they, if you remember, after the mass killings there, they tore the building down. I think I kind of understand how that community felt. You've had 24 kindergartners and first and second graders killed. Why does anybody ever want to go back there? But they had to build a new one. So you would think when they built a new one, they would have thought a lot about safety and security. And one of the things in terms of looking at the blueprint of that building, it is a very open design. Because one of the things they were convinced of, and our own chief of police here in town has talked to us about this, is the ability to see. Because if you can see, you can get prepared. You can, even at Ohio State this last week, I think, from the time the accident occurred and the gentleman, that's not the right word, the person started to stab everybody, I think it was 1 minute before the police were there. So if they see a threat coming and you have time to start doing some proactive things, it makes it much different than if it just arrives and it's right in your face right now. So all those things were talked about as we look at where this building is going to be. And the last thing, we actually did go around and look at other places. We went up north to look at Alex. We also went down into the cities. And when I say we, members of our staff, teachers, went down and took a look at things. How do they do it there? How does that work? What works well for you and what does not? So this is our current timeline. This is the one we've talked about going back to the bond, that this summer we're going to do some remodeling at the middle school and PME, and I'll show you that in a second. And we hope as soon as the embargoes come off the rural roads, the township roads, we can start the construction process out at the new site. That they tell me it all is going to be dependent upon how much frost and how much water and everything else goes into that. So we're hopeful in May we'll be breaking ground. That would be in the summer of 17. Really nothing changes through the summer of 19 in terms of where kids are going to school. But what changes is that site. And that will be full in development all through from the summer of 17 to the summer of 19. And then in the summer of 19, we plan on closing Sartell High School and remodeling this building for a 6A. So I had a good question asked earlier. Why do you need to do anything different to this building? From the very beginning, we've talked about this building has worked very well for us until we really ran out of space. And however, it works well as a high school building. And from a programmatic standpoint, we need to let our middle school staff have the same opportunity to go through, look at what they need to be as effective for their type of teaching and what we need to do in that. We have I've had a very strong middle school curriculum. It's worked very well. The last thing I want to do is tell them, we'll change it to make it fit this building. We want to go the other way around. Let's make sure the building fits the needs of what our staff needs to be the most effective teaching our kids. So that means for a year, this building will be occupied by construction workers, not by kids. And then in the fall of 2020 is basically the big change. Because high school kids will have, instead of driving here in the fall of 19, they'll drive out to the new high school. But starting in the fall of 20, we need to redo bus routing. We need to talk about who's going where, what's the times. We have ideas on all those, but we need to get a lot of input from all of you as we work that through. So at that point, we would open the middle school. The current middle school would become a 3-5 intermediate. If you remember back in the bond conversation, we said at that point, we're going to give them more space, and they're going to take advantage of that space, but there's not going to be a lot of remodeling in that building. There's going to be some aesthetic work done in that. That's something we know we are going to have to do at some point, but as of right now, that's not in the plan. And then ORE and PME would both become 4-year-old through second grade buildings, and the current district service center would keep our 3-year-olds and early childhood as well as the administrative offices that are there. So that's the timeline of what we're looking for. I've said a lot very quickly. Do you have any quick questions? I can either race through and then come back. Think of your question. If you have an absolutely dying question, let me know and we'll answer. So here's the real quick remodel. Again, for those of you in the back, I'm sorry, but this is the blueprint. This is pine metal. This is the front entrance, okay? Here's the front door. And really what we're doing with all of this is closing off this vestibule locked during the day. They will then come in to the office area and be vetted to make sure everything's all right, and then be allowed to go back to the building wherever they need to be. If you have been out at Oak Ridge Elementary, it's almost a carbon copy of that. The problem, however, is this room currently is an art room. So that's why we have to do the remodel. The office is here, so the office will shift from here to here. The art room shifts from here to here. And then there's a couple of other things that kind of shift around, but for the most part, that's what that's doing. Basically making it as visible. Our receptionists and other folks in the office from right here have a clear vision all the way out into the parking lot, which they don't have right now. So really they find out pretty much at this spot right here, even though we have a door locking system. If somebody comes in with somebody else, they're in the building before we even know it. And so that's the reason behind that change. We're also doing the middle school entrance. Again, it's almost a carbon copy of what you've saw before. Here's the current entrance. And what we're doing is putting in the vestibule now, a locking door that will come into the office area. These two work areas in the office currently have their backs to the entrance. They'll be turned around so they see who's coming into the entrance, and then the access back into the off or out into the regular school is here. Now remember, this is only, we lock those doors at all three of the buildings between the time kids get there. Everybody's there at 8:30 for the middle school, and then at 3:30. Then the regular vestibule still works and everything else takes place. So that would be the same way we do the elementaries. Both of those buildings will need some programmatic work done, but for right now, we can't do anything programmatically different because they're both full of kids. So until we get the high school kids moved and the 6-8 out, you really can't expand out to do the program differences because they're still full. In fact, our middle school is as full as hopefully it will ever be. I don't know if there's a space that we can remodel into a classroom. We're already using our hallway spaces, so that would be that particular one. So now I'm going to change. Those were remodels. Now I'm going to go back to that programming conversation. So if you remember, I gave you those two stats that we heard today, but here's really, as we try to talk about it in big topic areas, we want to make sure our kids, when they get out of the high school, are ready for a career, and if that means they need a post-secondary and go to college, we want to make sure they're ready for that. That's primarily our goal. We know they need content knowledge. We know they need the learning and innovation skills that we're hearing more and more about that makes us different from other places around the world. We know they need those life skills no matter what. They still have to live and have a happy life, even though they might be the brightest people in the world. And we think we find more relevancy if we make partnerships within our community. And how can we bring folks in so they can see what those of us in education and those of you in the real world always talk about. Because I have been in a classroom setting or in a school setting. I'm 58 years old. I've been in it for 53 years, since I've been 5 years old. Some would say I've never had a real job. I've never been out in the real world. And there is some validity to that. We in education sometimes get very accustomed to that. So we need community partnerships to help us make sure our kids understand that it's not always going to be like it is in school. There are other ways of things that are taught and other ways that you can learn. So these community partnerships are really important. We're also finding more and more that kids need to be prepared to have their learning as being very visible. Because as we hear the industry talk to us about what they need from kids that come into the new jobs, is they need to be creative, they need to be innovative, they need to work in teams, and they aren't going to just go behind a door all by themselves and figure something out in most places. They're going to be very much in a larger group working together. And so one of the things we want to model as a school is the same thing they're going to need to have as they move on into that career. So we want learning to be visible. And all of us know this. Our kids learn as much when they're in school and when they're out of school. Learning's everywhere. It's one of the reasons why kids that have active and engaged parents do better in school, because they have more opportunities to use what they've learned in school in other settings. And so, I've always had people ask me, I'm going to take my kids for a week on vacation and they're going to miss school. Now, the old school teacher in me said, well, don't do that, do it during the summer, because they're going to miss the most important thing I talk about during that time. However, if I had an opportunity to go visit the Sistine Chapel, I think that's probably worth missing a week of my world history class. You would actually learn a lot more from that experience than you're going to learn from me. And that's something that parents always need to consider. But it's about what learning is. It's not something that just happens in a classroom. All right, so now you hear, I've done a lot of philosophy talking, a lot of program talking. Let's look and see what the building actually looks like. This is a concept statement of how we're trying to take the concept that we talked about in programming and say we want all our kids to have excellent content knowledge, but we also want to bridge that into a relevant experience with specialty areas and community partnerships. So is there a way in the design can enhance that opportunity to take us from being very much content-based, but also having a good working understanding of how that works and how can the building help facilitate that. So our architects, after listening to our teaching staff, came up with this line. It's the concept of how we can celebrate that learning, and that we talk about how we bridge the learning from the content area into the specialties more relevant areas. So as we go through the blueprint, I want you to find the bridge. By the way, it's pretty obvious, but I think you'll see that. The other thing that's really important about conceptually is this idea that as a community we like spots for where our kids can create and we can go see them. And they can also, we can gather there, that we don't have, that we like to get around and see one another. I'm always amazed whenever we have a performance here, we usually have something taking place in the gym or the pool at the same time, and how you can never get out of this auditorium because everybody gets right out to that front little entrance area and starts to talk. It's the greatest thing about it. We're still a small town. We're still a small community. We like one another. So it's actually a pretty good place to gather. So how can we do that in the design of this building? This is a little conceptual drawing at the bottom. We'll come back to it if we need to. I think it just is better to see the building itself. So, real quickly, blocking in front. This is Oak Ridge. This is 27th, and this is Pine Cone, 35th. All of this right now is in beans. It's all just been combined. There's a lot of stakes out in the field. I'm trying to figure out how good the soil is. And that's one good thing I can tell you right now. We have good soil for building. That was one of the worries. Number one, you don't want too much black dirt. You need something that's compactable. So we have a nice combination of soils right now. So I had this conversation earlier with a couple of folks that came early. The city and the school will be talking about this intersection, and this intersection. Right now, whether or not they should be signaled or whether they should be roundabouts. And we can all get into conversations who loves roundabouts and who doesn't love roundabouts. But I will tell you my personal opinion and also my leadership position as the superintendent. I'm in favor of a roundabout at the entrance to the school. For one reason, from the traffic from the north on this current site is coming at 55 miles an hour. They have to slow by the time they get to 27 to 40, we hope. But most of the time, that's people like me going to work and probably going too fast. I don't want to put 16-year-olds turning a left-hand turn in the face of that traffic coming south without having some other protection for that. A light is a little bit of a problem because if the light is green 23 hours out of the day and it's only red at those times when we're doing kids in and out, there are still chances of people blowing through intersections. And the one great thing about roundabouts is you may hate them for all other reasons, but the safety in terms of the left-hand turn you might get in a 15-mile-an-hour crash, but you're not going to get in a 50-mile-an-hour crash. And my scariest moments in my teaching career, my administrative career, is dealing in car accidents with kids. And I don't want to do anything that will actually make that happen, even more likely to occur. So, however, I don't get to make the decision, and neither does the board. That's a decision that the council has to make with some, they're being very willing to have some consultation with us. We met with the traffic engineer yesterday, and we're starting down that conversation of what needs to happen. So, there'll be some combination here, here, and here. One of the other issues that many people have asked about is there's, the way the city is telling it to me, they're planning on extending their bicycle trail, their walking trail that's currently on the east side of Pinecone out to the school site. Once it gets to the school site, it would be the school then that would make sure we connect it to the subdivision that's just north of where the new school will be. But they need to figure out how to get the trail from one side of the road to the other side of the road, because that's truly the biggest issue on Pinecone. And then there are differences in how roundabouts work for pedestrians and how the roundabouts or how the lights work for pedestrians. So those are still decisions, but I'm hearing the city being very committed, at least administratively and engineering, that they're committed to getting this done before we're in that building. I keep saying 2018 to get it all done would really be great. Just don't press it to 2019, but we'll have to make that happen. Yep.
All the in and out traffic to the school will be at that one location?
No, let me show you that. This would be where the roundabout would be, and this would be a one-way that would come in here. It will go up, and during drop-off times, cars would come up, do a U-turn, come back, and then drop off on this side and exit back out. That's one way into the school. The other way into the school is through the north entrance to come over here. You'd come down, and this is a one-way that comes in and out. So we'd have two. And the north entrance, we really think will be used predominantly by kids that live north of the building and our buses. That's where the buses would come through. So we'd like a little bit of separation between those two. We don't want to repeat what we have here. Our intersection down at the bottom, for a number of reasons, just doesn't work. We've thought about ways of trying to improve that for a long time. Actually, as we talk about the middle school being here, that's also one of the big questions as to how do we get that taken care of. So, 500 parking spots here, 200 here, 100 here. We currently, with the street, have about 500 parking spots here. So we hope to solve that problem as well, getting people accessibility. The other thing, just to get it in your frame of mind, this is a half mile from one intersection to the next. So when we start talking about the parking lot, it's really, even though it's sometimes if you look at the plan, it looks like it's a long, long walk, it's really no farther than any of the spots we have in this building, even though there are 300 more spots. It's pretty much wrapped around that opening area. I'm going to talk more about the fields and what we're doing with the fields after we get done with the inside, and then we'll come back out to the outside. So this is the actual building itself. And this is, again, we'll blow it up so you can see it a little bit better, but it won't get a lot better. So if you need to move down, I'm more than willing to have you closer. So here is the front entrance. These are our 6 learning neighborhoods. So these are designed to be where most of our content knowledge will be distributed in those areas. What I'm saying for that is we call them learning studios. Sometimes you might call them classrooms, but they'll be on this wing. This is the performing art, music, and one of the special ed areas in the building. The commons is all of this area. And it's probably our most important area, and I'll blow that up here in just a second. And then this, of course, is the 4 gyms. Those are easy to see. This is where the pool is, and this is the locker rooms and all of that. This is a mat room, which will be used for wrestling as well as PE, and these are weight room and a general fitness area. So we're going to go into each one of those so you can see them a little bit closer. I'm sorry, that's a great thing. Pinecone's over here to my right. I'm an old geography teacher, so everything's, the top of the page is always north. So this is north up here. So Pine Cone's along this side, 35th's here, ORE is way, you can't even see it down there, but it's down in that corner. So we'll come in, and if you remember coming off the 500 parking lot, we'll come in right to this spot. So I'm gonna start out in that spine. This is the commons area. So as you walk in the front door, office will be right to your right. Notice we're not gonna have to come back and remodel that area. We already have the design taken care of after or once school starts, how people will come into that area. This is the commons gathering space, and again, emphasizing how we like the gathering. It's a spot where all can come together. The Performing Arts Center is just out of this picture. So if you come to a performing arts, you come through this area. The gym is this direction, so you come through this area. And this connects all of our major activities, and our academic areas are connected through the commons. Those of you that have kids in school right now, if you've ever been there during lunchtime, it's a pretty full space. This area is more than twice the size of our current commons, our current lunchroom space. So we have more than twice the amount of square footage to handle that. So if we were to grow a little bit, we were able to handle that within this quite well. So as I go down, here's the kitchen and the serving area. And remember we talked about community partnerships and how we want to have the tie to the relevant world. So down in this area, we have a culinary arts facility. It's the old word, we call them family and consumer science, but it's a much more specific area because now we're talking about restaurant skills and how could you become a chef and how can you go off to tech college and someplace else, learn what you do here and then move on. This is a relevancy area. Right off this, it's the one thing that we don't have tied right to the commons, is an area where we want our biomed area to be. We currently have a great partnership with St. Cloud Orthopedics in which our kids follow a patient in their system, and it works really well. Our kids are signing up more and more for that because a lot of them like medicine. They want to have something involved with that, but they also want a hands-on experience of what does that mean? I mean, I know I need to know my biology and chemistry, but is there an application of that? And that's what these areas are going to try to offer them. We have a Saber Connection Lab. We have a number of kids that have a limited disability. They're going to have a different kind of job opportunity in the future, and we want to make sure we're preparing them as well as we prepare all our other kids. And right now, we have about 50 to 75 kids that use the Saber Connection area to learn hands-on skills. Literally, how can I go out and do some of those manual tasks that is going to be a challenge for some of these students, but if they have more opportunities, they can learn to do that. And we want that, we want that to be very, very visible. We don't want to act like we're hiding where our special ed kids are. That's the last thing we want to do. It's a major thing for what we accomplish. Just south of that will be a black box theater. It's really a fancy word for a 2,000 square foot classroom that will put black on the walls so we can actually do small little performances in there. And when I mean small performances, I'm talking about students being able to give a speech to 2 classrooms rather than their own, and do it in a smaller gathering. Also, what this room does for us right now, but it may be a 1-act play that there are only maybe 45 or 50 people that are going to come to. Opportunity for our kids to be creative and have that experience to communicate to others. Then, and we'll show this in a little bit more detailed area, these are some of our more hands-on lab areas, and what I'm talking about there is career and technical education, our arts area, and I'll show you that in just a second as we come back. But just remember, it's down in this spot. Also outside the black box, and Brenda Steve will show that to you real well in a minute when we do our walkthrough. This is a learning stairway. In other words, it's a way to get up. Maybe all of you had this experience. As I was growing up, we went to Grandma's house. And what do you always use Grandma's stairway to the second floor or to the basement to do when the grandkids were all there? You had to have the picture there, right? Everybody had to sit there, and you learned how to get along, and you fought with your cousins or whatever else. But you used that stairway to see what else was going on. This is a learning stairway. It's the same kind of concept that these are steps to get us up to the second floor, but they're also designed where you can sit there and watch a performance by one of your fellow students or by a guest speaker and sitting on the steps. And you'll see that as it goes through. It's a way to get double use out of an area. And we're trying to be efficient as we go through that. So as you go through the commons, each one of the learning neighborhoods, which I'll show in just a minute, comes off the commons. And then this is our counseling suite. Plenty of opportunity for kids there. We have a school store. We have, we're hoping to have some of our kids run a coffee shop area there. That's a very popular thing in the newer high schools around. Again, it's an application skill that they can use, and it's not a very complicated thing. That's all they can about sell is the beverage. They can't get into making anything else because the food safety issues become a little much. And then we have our current sale rooms, which are for some of our alternative learners, would be in this space as well. So what I'm trying to convey with this by starting here is that all of our specialty and the ties to the community are all off this commons area. It's that common gathering space where we can all come in, share, learn from one another, and have those opportunities to go and learn more. Right now, if you wanted to walk down to some of the fantastic things that our kids are doing down in the welding lab or in the wood shop area, I would guess that 99% of the people that walk into the building have no idea where it even is. By the way, if you want to know, it's a long walk that direction. It was the only place we could put it at the time. It was available space, so that's what we did. But it almost makes those kids feel at times, by the way, we're struggling to get girls particularly involved with that. And part of that is, that's where all the guys hang out down there. Why would I want to do that? So we need to find an experience to make all of our learning opportunities available to our kids. So that's the goal of this whole commons area. So now we'll go back to the regular, and now I'm going to go, I believe, to the learnings. Yep. These are our learning studios. Okay? So there's 6 of these from this point out that are all alike. Kay Nelson has our, oh, by the way, I'm Jeff Sweebert. I am the school superintendent. I hope all of you didn't know that when you came in. I don't think I ever even introduced myself, so sorry. Hopefully you know that. From this point east, this is all on the east side of the building. Each one of these learning neighborhoods is identical. That's what you're seeing being passed around. There are 3 wings, first and a second floor, so there are 6 different neighborhoods. We're figuring that each one of those neighborhoods will have about 150 students in them when they're all being in use. So, as you go through across the top, classroom, 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 classroom. I'm supposed to call those learning studios to define that they're different than our traditional classroom, but for the most part, they're classroom space, okay? Then, here we have a flex lab, and what that flex lab really means is it doesn't have carpeting on the floor, it has water, and it has the availability for us to do more creative things in that space. It may be scheduled with the class, it may not be scheduled with the class. It depends on where we are in the process. Then as we move our way back, this is a collaboration space for our kids in a more quiet setting than would be out in the commons. That is a 2-story, as you see the model as it passes around. You'll look at it from the top. This is what it's like on the first floor. Then we have a small group room where kids can get together 4 or 5 to do work together, maybe with the teacher. We have a medium group room. Some of the medium group rooms, there are 6 of those, but some of those are also special ed. We'll actually just give them the special ed area. So we have special ed presence around the building. And then we have a staff collaboration area for everybody that's working in that wing to be able to work together, have access to one another in that process. So each one of the wings works that way, and that is what is being passed around. Those wings have, this is the connection to the northernmost wing, then the next one's here, and the next one's down. They all have stairways down from the second floor in that collaboration area, and they also all have stairways up from that learning stairway. So there are 6 different ways to get to those learning neighborhoods, first or second floor. There is not a tie this direction, and so people have asked, well, man, isn't that going to be a long walk from here all the way back to here? Because in this current building, if you go by where the counseling office is, right in front of the media center, almost all of our kids seem to have to go through that choke point every day, or every hour, every passing period, whether it be on the first floor or the second floor. Now, instead of 2 of those, we have 6 different ways in which kids can get from spots to spot. And also, this is only the capability of having 150 kids at a time, whereas our current wings may have 400 kids at a time. So, there's also an elevator, and for the life of me, I hope Brenda I can't remember where the elevator is. Where's the elevator? Is it in this section or down in the middle section?
I think it's in the middle.
We think it's here. We'll find it. It's too small to see right now as well. So, now I'm going to go back to the main. Now we're going to go north. This is the Performing Arts Center here. This current facility holds about 500. That facility will hold 800. It's actually designed very different from this one, whereas there will be a stage, whereas instead of just this 3 steps up, it'll be a 42-inch high stage. There'll actually be an orchestra pit in the front of the stage area, so that if in the rare occasions when you do a musical and you need that, you can do that. It will be about the same width as the current stage is. It'll have a balcony in the back. That's where the second floor will come in. It is, as we were talking to the consultant yesterday about it, it is a very intimate environment. It will hopefully have acoustics that my music people tell me that we're never going to get away from miking. I just think of people like, I don't have to mic, but I have a very large booming voice. But this place should have the acoustics that we won't have the dead spots, the inability to hear. We'll probably still mic, but we won't have near the problems that we have in this particular space. One of the other things that makes this building a little different from the one we're currently in, it will be fully ADA compliant. So right now, it's a very difficult thing in this building to get from one floor to the other if you can't go up and down steps. We have a very small elevator to make that work. It doesn't always, we don't let everybody use it. So if you come to performance, you gotta walk down a lot of steps. This is designed to really minimize the amount of steps and still give the vision lines that we'd like to give. Across that area is our music suite, and that would be band, orchestra, and choir. One of the things that this building, we just don't have right now, we have an orchestra program that's grown and developed in our middle school. We're gonna be having 25 to 30 kids in orchestra next year come to this building, and we don't have any place to put them. By the time we build this building, we'll have 9th, 10th, and 11th graders will all have transitioned up into orchestra. So we'll have a space for them. This right south of it is our developmental delayed kids, an area part of our special ed area. It's just one aspect of special ed. It's a little bit off the beaten path, and that's done on purpose. Sometimes we like to have spaces where everybody can gather, but for some of our kids, it's better when it's not a real loud, noisy place. And so we want to make sure we meet the needs of all of our kids by having the space here. This is our nursing office, and then this is the principal's office. Across the hallway was the counselor's office. That's kind of done on, that is done on purpose. Sometimes kids might want to talk to a counselor where they think if the principal knows, they might get upset about that. I don't really think that's a true problem, but it's a perception for kids, so that's one of the reasons why we like to have that separated. Now we're going, that area I wanted to remind you of, that's sort of that career technical education. So here's where our metal shop will be. Here's where our fabrication lab will be. Here's where welding. We have a creative lab right outside of it. It's part of our media space where we're really trying to design the things that will fabricate here. So we have that close proximity. We also have both of the art rooms there. So a lot of some of the greatest art that we have around our community right now is art that was done in memory of the old mill. And you can see a lot of that's done with steel, and it's been done by welders, and it's done by others. So we think it's a great combination, not just for that reason, but for a variety of reasons to keep all that together. We also have a large garage door right here. Our intent is on our southern porch of our school to have a fab lab outside. We'd like to get into some of the things that some area schools are doing, Habitat for Humanity's homes. tiny houses the tech college is into, I don't think we'll probably get into doing those. But it's that way of getting a skill across a large area or getting access to that skill. And we don't want to put them as well, if we're going to do a Habitat for Humanity's house, let's put it on the south side where everybody can see what it is. That's a good thing to be talking about. It's great for those programs. So it would be down in this area. And two arts, and then with this area has changed a lot. We keep talking to our art teachers and talking about what it is exactly they want and to make sure we're doing it appropriately. So is this our current design, Brenda?
Yes.
Okay, this is the most current one. One larger, one a little bit smaller, an area for some private artwork as well. Looks kind of weird, sitting all off there by itself. If you notice, here's the auxiliary gym. This is a mechanics lab. You might want to refer to that as an auto shop. One of the things, we definitely have a lot of kids that have been involved in the automobile through the Discovery Academy down in at Apollo. We want to maintain that program, maybe even grow that program, but it's difficult to figure out in that spine of our commons, how do you get 4 or 5 cars also tied into that? So this is our exception area. It doesn't really fit our mantra of trying to get everybody in where you can see it, but it's very much, our folks are saying this could be a good way for us to expand what we're doing rather than being very limited in that space. So we have the mechanics area just off the corner of the building. And you can kind of see it in that design a little bit there. And then last but not least, probably the most visited areas of our building because of all the different activities. 3 gymnasiums, and I want you to notice the gap between here and here and here and here. Does that make sense to anybody? I'm an old basketball coach, so it made complete sense to me the problem that we have. Our current gym, our 3 gyms, actually when you try to use them all at the same time, the floors are almost hitting one another. So it's a real safety problem. You've got the ball going one direction on one court, the other court's doing the other thing, and you really don't like the fact that you have the kids running in. So we want to make sure we take care of that. We want to make sure we have an auxiliary gym big enough to do a number of different things. We'll talk about where some programs will be a little bit later on, but we think in terms of the amount of seating, the storage, the other things, that this will work real well for us. We also have a pool, and you can't, these are 2 diving boards, and this is kind of the outline of the pool itself. Sorry, for some reason it didn't show real well on the print. More deck space, 8 lanes, wider lanes than, am I right on that, John? Didn't we decide there's slightly wider lanes, right? So instead of 8-foot lanes, they're 9-foot lanes, or 6. I don't have a swim coach here, I need one of those. But we've talked to them and made sure we've designed that. A little bit more seating, but not a lot more seating. Still standing room seating, because that seems to be what a lot of folks like to do in the pool areas. Run in, watch their child swim and whatever it may be, and then run back out and cool down and get back outside. So that's the pool area. Down here is that what I've talked about before, the mat room, the wrestling room, weight training, fitness area, and there are those 2 biomed labs.
Question, where's the spectator seating in the gymnasium?
Oh, good question. This will be the main performance gym. So bleachers this side and this side.
You have portable bleachers in there too.
Yeah, we'll still have this. They'll meet code, which our current ones are right on the edge of meeting. They'll work just like our current ones do. The one difference will be, we're going to have you come in from the side on this court. Right now, everyone would come in these 2 doors. We're actually going to encourage people to come in on this side, so this row of bleachers will be slightly shorter as a result. That gives us better access to the commons. It gives us better utilization of that space. That lets us close off some other areas when we need to have them closed off for other things going on. We're not needing bleachers to meet our every night of the week performances that are taking place, whether it be volleyball, basketball, wrestling. Bleachers are not a main, we're not short right now, and we don't anticipate being short in the future. However, we do need the space to do all the different things that are going on in there. So here's the whole school. Now, I always forget this. If you hadn't noticed, I didn't talk about the bridge. And you're gonna get a chance to see that in just a minute visually. But this is the second floor, and I'll blow it up here a little bit. So here's the second floor of those learning rooms. But here, overlook, this X lines are two-story areas, so they're overlooking the common space. So all of these you can see from down below. Our science areas are what we consider to be our bridge from the content knowledge to the application within science to down on the first floor, the relevant community partnership types things. So the science area works as our bridge, and you'll see that in all four of the labs. Our science teachers have looked at the lab space and have said they want it different from how they currently have it. They think it would be more effective for our kids, and they're going to have some opportunities where they will actually have two classes working in the same space, but they can maximize the use of that space in the different applications that they have. So we'll see a lot of, they've had a lot of input in terms of how they want to design those particular areas. And then this, as you can see, are the stairways coming up from below. And these are, one of those should say elevator. I still don't see the elevator. Now I'm going to have to get my glasses out and figure out where it is, but I'm sure there's an elevator right in there. So, what am I going to do on the second floor?
What's the concept for the bridge? I guess I did.
Okay, thank you, because I apparently didn't say it well enough. If we go back to our programming conversation, let me get back to that slide. Concept is our three learning neighborhoods, or those learning studios on that side is where the basic content knowledge is going to be. Then we're using the science, which is the active lab space, the practical application in some cases of that, to bridge over to the other side of the building where we have a lot of our community partnership groups, the culinary arts, the biomed lab, the CTE areas. So it's a conceptual thing. It's not necessarily that it's going to change how we teach science, but it's one of the things that the architects did in their thought process of how they developed the building. Okay?
Where were you 65 years ago when I started high school?
You know, in the building that I first taught in Mount Vernon, Iowa, it was used, there was a common high school plan that was developed during the Depression, and that about everybody used in Iowa schools at that time. So if you went to a school in the that was built in the 1930s in Iowa, you would see them all very similar. Well, the interesting thing is, when I go to the office where I'm in today, and I walk into the Sartell Elementary, that building is almost a carbon copy of the one I first started teaching in, that design in the 30s. Today we hire architects who design things a little bit differently to try to meet the needs of what we're asking for today. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on the site plan. What we're currently in is what's called 50% schematic design. And when we're in this phase, we've got everything put together. Now we're taking it to our construction manager and saying, price this thing and make sure we can afford, this is what the architects are supposed to be doing all along, but we want to make sure before we go out to bid that this thing's in the realm of what we can do. We have a very established budget, we know what we can afford, and so therefore we want to make sure it all fits. So this is what we hope to do in phase one in our outside design. Just like when I was talking about the inside, that's what we hope to do in our phase one design as well. We're just waiting now to hear the next step. So I'm hoping that all these things happen, and I'm pretty confident that they will in one way or the other, but I just want to make sure I'm telling you it's still a little bit draft at this point. So, remember inside, we talked about a common gathering space. Outside, and I'm sorry, can we turn the lights down any? Is there any way to make this any better? Can you guys see that at all? Are you okay? All right, I'll try to draw it through just a little bit. So the concept here is to put a plaza here. And a plaza is a fancy word for where the restroom's going to be and where's the concession stand, and where's a gathering space for us to be. So just like indoors, we'd like a plaza or a commons where if I'm watching a baseball game or a softball game, I have access and I have a gathering space for all the different things that may be going on. Because I'm hopeful that there will be times that we're playing a baseball game here, We may have 3 softball games going on here. We may have a lacrosse event going on. That would be the spring activities. In the fall, we might have a football, some sort of event going on here, a soccer event going on, and we might have elementary groups using the other fields that we have in that area. So the design would be to put in 5, you can barely see this one, but there is one right there. 5 major practice areas. These 2 will be used practice areas, but will be designed for in the future to be performance. So when the time comes, if there's enough community support to move the current stadium out to this site, that's where it can go. But there's no money for that in this plan right now. So these will be designed as practice fields. Then we have a 3-plex, and we're hoping, we're gonna price the 4th so we can get all of those things done. And then we would use, this is an existing baseball field, which is actually in phenomenal shape right now, thanks to a partnership with our local baseball association. And that one's in great shape, so we're not gonna tear it up, but we'll do another baseball field here, as well as the main performance field here. All of these, we would hope would be graded out, so they would be fully available. The hope is that all of our high school activities will be able to stay at this site to practice outside. So all of the outside events will be able to practice here. Am I missing one?
Track.
I'm sorry, thank you, except for track. Cross country will have trails out in this area. We have a plan for where the trails, you can kind of see those as they snake through and then they go down and around, somewhere like that. So we think they'll be able, a lot of practice areas for that. Hopefully I have to convince the cross country coach to not practice on pine cone. We do like to run on the roads in town from time to time. So anyway, so we hope that, with the exception of track, to have everybody in those spaces. And I forget, and this looks like, well, we forgot it, put it up here way out of the way. This is the tennis courts, and we actually put them up there for a reason. Those of you that have been out at lacrosse, soccer, baseball games, recognize we are out on the prairie, and the wind does blow out in this area. And of any sport that is really impacted by high winds, it's our tennis program. Of any place that we have a little shelter, there are homes along here. There is an old windbreak here, and we're hoping to maximize that and get a little bit of shelter for the tennis court. So that's why they're a little bit in a different spot on the site. So, before we're going to end on, I think, the high point, that you're actually going to see a 3D model that the architects put through relatively early on. It doesn't go through all areas of the building, but Brenda does a marvelous job in kind of explaining as you go through what you're seeing and how it all looks. Number 1, the building will not be made of white marble. That's just how the architects put it in place. It really looks cool in white marble, but I don't think we can afford that, and so that's not the plan. I would imagine there will be a lot of earth tones in the colors of the building, but we haven't had that conversation yet. Part of that will be determining by price and how those things will work to go together. But before I let Brenda start on that, I wanted to go back to any questions about the site, any questions about the inside, so that when we get to the fly-through, as they call it, you will have those answers in your head, so it might make more sense to you. What questions do you have? Scott?
I didn't know it was in the locker room, now you got all that stuff out here, where are the locker rooms then?
Oh,
Are they close by, are they?
Okay, actually, if I go back to that one, oops, going the wrong way. One of the great things about the location to the building is the locker rooms are right there. So the access from here to here is less than 100 yards. It's actually a pretty good spot, and the door would open, if you remember, the wrestling room was first, and then there were 4 locker rooms, which were kind of right in here. They'll have great accessibility to that. And if you remember that conversation that I said about why we wanted to shut off some doors, that would be one of the reasons why. We may have kids still coming in and out of practices, whether it be football, whether it be lacrosse, soccer. They'll have that access, but we close the doors so that people aren't coming down the hallways that they're in at that time.
Speaking of lockers, are there lockers for the kids?
Yes, and I thank you. I'm going to go, that's always a good question, and I didn't show it, so let me go back to that. On this drawing, there are locker bays here, here, and then I need to go to the second floor, and there are locker bays here, and here, and here. And we have the same amount of lockers that we have kids. We had a conversation with it. Do our kids need lockers? Should we just put them in backpacks? Because lockers are expensive. But it's kind of a split. We even talked to our own students about it. What would you prefer if you had a backpack? We got answers going both ways. We do live in Minnesota. There probably is an occasion where our kids should wear coats, even though, holy cow, most of the time they don't wear coats, but they still need a place to put some of that stuff. And so we plan for a locker for every kid, for every student, excuse me.
Gymnastics, is that going to be?
Good. Now, thank you. I need to bring that up. As we've been doing that, we've talked both inside and outside that we want to make every program better than it currently is. And we're talking about academic programs as well as activities. One of the things that we really struggle with in the design is the amount of square footage that gymnastics takes up during the season, and its inability to be able to move stuff around so that we could, when we're not using it as a gymnastics area, you can't move it all in that same day to still be using it as something else. So we are right now thinking our best answer for gymnastics is to keep them right where they are, do some improvements in that area, and offer some possibilities of maybe they don't need to move out of that space during the off season. That's still a conversation, but that's really the way we're heading with that. The one right over here in our current auxiliary gym. Because then it doesn't put them in that mode of constantly having to take up, put down. We really need that space for the PE area. That's one of the main drivers with it. But gymnastics and football and track are the three programs that don't really follow out to the new high school. Football will actually have practice out of the new area, but they're still going to perform here. Soccer will probably perform here some because we like nighttime soccer events, so they'll perform, but they also have the ability, we're planning on doing much like we have over here on the hill right now, so they'll have something very similar to that. Now we're also hoping, as we put all this together and figure out the pricing, there are going to be some things we're going to ask the community to see if they'll support and give us a little bit more. You know, not from tax dollars, but from private donations. We've had a lot of great support in this community in the past, so we'll want to see how all of that plays out as we go through that. Great question.
One last question also. Indoor batting cages and stuff during the spring season before you go outside the deck?
That would be in the auxiliary gym or in the main gym, depending upon when you're saying the spring is. Sometimes around here, we'd like to do some of that in February, so we think the auxiliary gym would be able to do that. We haven't got to that granular detail yet, but that's kind of the general thought.
Okay, thank you. Square footage versus current?
This is 290,000 square feet, and my current is 254. This building's 254, that one's 290. However, the biggest difference between the two, no, that's right, that is exactly the difference between the two. I was thinking we added something, but no, they're about the same types of programs are in both spaces. Great question. Others?
Are all three learning wings essentially the same?
Yep, first and second floor. There are small differences. There may be a medium group room that's a special ed room, but they're very, very similar. And that's what you still have sitting on your lap. Thank you. All right.
Is there a teacher's lounge in there?
There are 9 teachers collaboration areas. So it's what you want to define as a teacher's lounge. I would believe there's great spots for teachers in those 9 different areas. We still have a little conversation to do about that, but that's what the design is right now.
Library?
Thank you. There is no media center here as it currently exists. And in fact, if you walk to our current media center, you would find we really don't have a media center as it currently exists. We have 3 different areas. And Brenda will do a nice job as we do the walkthrough, talk about those 3 areas that the square footage we think of as media, but we're using those in a very different way. The biggest thing is, you know, as a former social studies teacher, I wanted to make sure all my kids knew how to look up stuff in the reference section. right now, the reference section is what's sitting down there on each one of their laps. They get it far quicker and far more educationally sound in that form.
But
So
Jeff,
we're reusing that space, Brenda.
we do have, in our current language arts classrooms right now, they have classroom libraries where we have lots of different fiction and nonfiction books, and our hope is that those libraries will expand in a particular learning neighborhood in some of the learning studios, so that students can have access, easy access actually, to reading those books. And we're also hoping to put some type of a library in our coffee shop, sort of like the neighborhood library where you can just borrow and you don't have to check out. So take a book, bring a book, take a book, trading kind of thing. So we know the importance of books for kids and we want them to read. The books are just going to be located in different areas.
Is there a quiet learning area like a library that's not full of?
Yeah, and those learning wings, as we go back, that's really what these spaces are in each one. Those are larger, but then there are also these small or these medium group rooms. Remember, there are 6 of those. Those are also spaces where they can really, and the small group rooms the same way.
In addition to that, Jeff, if you just point at a staff collaboration space,
This
just
spot?
that there's a little teeny purple spot that holds about 4 to 5 students that really are quiet zones for kids and for staff if they just need to work, but students that want to work in small groups and just study can do that in those spaces as well. So there are 6 of those too.
It was interesting, last year, one of our student board members, you asked her where did she go when she wanted a quiet spot to study with a friend. She went in the vestibules of this building because that was the quietest area during the day that she could find. So that's why we're trying to build as many of those types of spots in. The other thing that we're trying to build in is if you walk through this hallway during the day, there's a little alcove in which there's a seat that has blue jeans on it. There are always 5 or 6 kids gathered in that spot. There's those type of little nesting areas are, I shouldn't call it nesting, but those types of areas are very valuable for our kids, and we want to make sure we have plenty of those in this building. As you'll see through the fly-through, we'll have that. So I'll answer more questions when we're done, but I'd like to go next to let Brenda Steve go through, and will you give me there, Amy? Okay. And remember, it will look different from the outside than this shows, but it gives you a good idea of the 3D dimension of that.
Yeah, borrow your laser.
You sure can. And can all of you hear Brenda?
I'll speak up.
Okay.
So that you can hear me. Okay, just to orient you to where we're at, Pinecone is along this road. So this is north, this is south. Oak Ridge Elementary is actually down in this region. And Jeff referenced on the site plan a plaza area. That's this area right here. John, when you were asking about how would I get to the locker rooms, this sidewalk leading in right here would lead directly into the locker rooms, which are just in this region. So it's actually quite close. This is 35th, and so there's a couple different access points, and Jeff referenced this. Students and parents would come in this way. They would drive up, turn around, drop kids off. They would enter through the building right here. Along 35th, this is an entrance. Actually, people coming in this way could also go all the way out and exit here. This will be an entrance only, so you can come through and exit this way, but you will also be able to go down and exit all the way out. So a lot more options than what we have now. At least that's what we're thinking right now. So the 3 learning neighborhoods are right here. We're going to take a spin around the outside of the building, and then we're going to actually go in and see the learning commons, and also go into one of the learning neighborhoods, or go into the commons. So you can see that the learning neighborhoods are 2 stories with space in between. About 50 feet, I think, is about the space in between. Student outdoor dining will be in this region. This is the main entrance. There's a 500 parking stall, which will be student parking right in this region on the east side. Main office, this is music. Amy, if you want to pause for just a second. This is where students will come in as a bus drop-off. This was the choir room, the orchestra room, officials and student athletes for games, and also probably staff parking during the day. Started up there. So again, this is Performing Arts Center. This is receiving. This is the event gym, and the auxiliary gym is right back here. And as we spin around, we're gonna see the pool. Fields, again, are out in this region out here. This is the pool. You can see the water. Multi-purpose mat room. This is the fitness and weight training area. And then this green space, Amy, if you want to pause for a sec. This green space out here we will use for FIAD classes, but also for our athletes as they train out in that weight room and fitness center. They'll be able to also spill out into this region out here. Jeff referenced the construction pad that we have. We're hoping eventually to be able to build a Habitat for Humanity home. This is the Fab Lab. You can drive it in if you want to. So this is a fabrications lab. Our students would design the Habitat for Humanity home and then actually construct it in here and on this pad. This is the art studios. This is actually science. Staff collaboration on both floors. And then this is the southernmost learning neighborhood. These are the flex labs, so they have a sink and no carpet, so we can be a little messier in there. There's one on this level as well. Then you can kind of see that student collaboration space in between. We're going to get a close-up view between the learning neighborhoods, so students can actually spill out here and enjoy the outdoors. Learning studios or classrooms are on the eastmost side and the northern side of this. Students will eat outside. They're psyched about that. That was huge for students to be able to do that. So we're going to walk into the building. On this side, you can see learning studios. And Amy, if you want to pause for just a second. As we go in, there's no doors, no windows, no color, no nothing. But that's not because there aren't any. It's just that they're not on this model, okay? So as we go into this main entrance, the main office is on the right-hand side, and Jeff described that you go in through these first doors, which we're entering now, and go to the right, and that is the main office. The servery or the kitchen is right in this region, and students will actually enter from this side, grab some food from 5 different lines and an a la carte area. We're hoping to do kind of food cuisines from around the world for kids. And then as you look down the commons, first of all, if I'm coming for an event, we would have just gone in the doors that we just entered. This is the hallway for the main gym. This is where concessions is going to be, we think. If I'm going to the Performing Arts Center, I would come in those same doors that we just entered and you go down this area. This is one of the learning bridges that Jeff referenced. So that's science. Science provides those technical skills that connect the math and the social studies and the language arts and the world language to the more specific things of culinary arts and tech ed. This is our counseling office, alternative learning or SAIL. Coffee shop will be in this region, and you'll be able to see where the students will be eating, and they'll be able to spill outside and eat in an outdoor area as well. Above us is science, and they're actually a physical bridge across the commons as well. What you're looking at now is the black box theater, so students will be able to perform and create in the black box, and then also do performances as students gather on those learning stairs. So this is one side of science over here. We're going to take a quick run up the steps, and we're going to actually look back down. When we get to the top of the steps and turn it, you just want to stop it for a second. So this is the other side. Go just a little bit more. This is the other side of science. So there's a hallway right out here, and then the classrooms are kind of behind it. This is the black box theater, and you can see that there are also steps that lead up to this area, so I can go up these steps, down the hallway, and all the way around. So Jeff referenced 6 different staircases, or 6 different ways, but there's actually 8 to get up, because there's another side here that also connects that science and connects that second wing. So we're gonna go into the southernmost learning neighborhood. This is a visual lab. This is 1/3 of the media center, a specialized lab where students will be able to create video, perhaps do news shows. We do a lot of projects with that in our classrooms. This is a medium group space and a small group space for students. You can see we're on the south end of the building. This is staff collaboration. Learning studios along the left-hand side. There are 4 along the side and then 1 at the end. That's a flex lab. And you'll be able to see over into that open student collaboration space. That's a medium group room there as well. Down down the steps, and at the bottom of the steps in each of the learning and neighborhoods, there's a small stage so students can actually present there as well.
By the way, there's a lot of glass. You recognize that real quickly. Whether or not it's floor to ceiling, we're still in conversations. We do recognize we live in Minnesota. There might be 24 inches of snow right outside. How do we handle that? So, yeah, and so we've been talking to our design trees, the engineering firm that we're using, talking about how we're gonna make sure that space is properly conditioned, whether it be heat or cool. So there will be some revisions of those things as we look through it. The amount of glass and the amount of glazing on the glass is also very important. Also, one of the things you don't see quite as well, there also are some, what do I want to call them, shade screens that they aren't going to be the full shade screen, but it's going to, when the summer sun is higher in the sky, it blocks off. When it's lower, you're going to get a little bit of the heat gain. We have said over and over again, we don't want a cool thing like our current skylight system is. We don't want something that looks cool but actually is terrible from a functionality standpoint. And those of you that walk into this building, the heat gain that we get, and by the way, during the winter, if you Excel Energy's come in and taken a map, where it shows where you're losing heat, it looks like we have one long chimney stack in terms of that. So part of that remodel of this building for a middle school will be to fix some of those things. But that was one of our real challenges to the group. Make sure, to our architects, make sure we don't make those kind of mistakes. This building needs to function. We're adding this amount of square footage. To heat it and cool, it's going to come out of our general fund, which is dollars we use for kids. So we need to make sure this building is efficient as possible. So we have challenged them from a heating and cooling the entire space. This building is not cooled the entire space. That building will be. But to heat and cool the entire space, we want to have less energy cost, even though it's 40,000 more square feet than we do in this building. That should, and they all say that shouldn't be a problem because 1993 versus 2016, we have improved the technologies. So we're really hopeful along that line. Well, that basically ends I'll get you in just a second. If you've been a great audience, you've actually sat and gapped. Notice how we didn't do any active learning, all the things we say we want to do. I didn't do one bit of that with you folks. But if you have any questions, please stay. We can look at it in more detail. If you need to go, feel free to go. Don't feel like you're walking out anything. But